Hey everyone! Thanks for tuning in with us at Hearing Her Voice. My name is Scarlett, and I am the founder of Women's March San Diego at UCSD. Today I wanted to talk about empowering women, like me, who struggle to break free from socioeconomic barriers and how to help them get unstuck. We had the opportunity to talk with Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, who is the chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus. Her work expands from advocating for women's rights, equal pay, protection in the workforce, to starting a new initiative called Unseen Latinas. The new innovation aims to address the continuing growth of inequality that California Latinas experience in economic outcomes, career and leadership opportunities, and education in the state. We hope you enjoy our discussion with Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. Hi, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. My name is Scarlett. I am the founder for Women's March San Diego at UC San Diego. Jinho is going to be helping me with the recording and keeping the time.
Hello.
Hey, great.
We are starting a podcast, so welcome to Hearing Her Voice. Our podcast aims to bring to light issues that women face, and this is in order to make or start a revolutionary change. I actually met you through League of Women Voters, and I wanted to bring you in and talk about women in leadership.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you for joining. So I want to begin with women in politics. I know that this past election, we saw a lot of women in federal positions, especially Latinas. What advice would you give them?
For women who actually are already in office?
Yes.
Well, I think that it's really important, in particular for Latinas, women in general, women of color, especially, and particularly Latinas, is to, figure out first who you are and why you're doing that, right? I often tell, especially young Latinas, that the system that I've chosen for myself, the world I've chosen to try to make change in, wasn't created for me. Right. I'm in the legislature, and the legislature's rules and cultural norms were created by a bunch of old white guys like 100 years ago. And so when I first got elected, one of the things I thought was really important is figuring out, what are the cultural norms that I'm going to challenge in office, right? There are a lot of things people will tell you. This is the way things are done. You're not allowed to get too emotional. You're not allowed to cry on the floor. You're not allowed to fall in love with your bills. You're supposed to take this in a certain way. And I'd ask, like, is that a rule? Is it written down somewhere? Because if not, I want to know and think about why these norms have been put in place, and if they could prevent me from advocating for my community in the best way possible. And I found that they mainly do create a barrier to true advocacy in office. And so I think it's really important as women enter office in particular is to ask those questions. What are the actual rules? I mean, I'm not suggesting we go up and true rules or laws. Sometimes we need to, but when you're going into an institution, whether it's a water board or a city council or Congress, you have to ask yourself, when people say you're not supposed to do this, well, why was that rule written? Or why was that not written, but why was it accepted? Why was that norm accepted? Who did they plan to keep in their place? And so often it's us. And so I think that's a really important kind of lesson. And it probably expands beyond politics, right? Or government office. It's as you enter the workforce and as you seek your place in the world, you have to challenge those cultural norms in order to fit in the way that is most advantageous to those that you're working for.
I agree. Bringing up the whole barriers. I know you're part of the initiative with Unseen Latinas, and I know that there has been a lot of barriers for opportunity in leadership. What can you tell us more about the initiative?
Well, over the last few years, one of the things that we've realized in office is that all these challenges we talk about that women have, and all these challenges that we talk about that people of color have, seem to compound specifically on Latinas. So, if you take the wage gap, for example, in California, we've done a lot to improve the male female wage gap, the gender gap, if you will, pay gap in California. In fact, we have made the biggest strides and we have the lowest pay gap in the nation. When you look at the numbers, in the aggregate. However, if you disaggregate them and look at just Latinas, you realize we actually have the worst numbers in the nation for Latinas. So while we've improved the lot of laws and opportunity for women overall, Latinas continue to be left behind more than any other demographic. In fact, Latinas make on average in California 44 cents on the dollar of their white male counterpart. And a lot of people make assumptions that that's because of the jobs they choose or because of work and family obligations that they choose to do. But even if you look at highly qualified, highly skilled, highly educated professions, and I'll give you one in medicine. So Latina surgeons make less than 50 cents on the dollar of the white male counterpart. So there's something else going on here. And we knew that, right? We knew if you look at representation of lawyers and on the bench, if you look at representation in elected office, if you look at the fact that Latinas are the only demographic who have never held a statewide office in California, all of this despite being 20% of our population. So we started asking ourselves, first of all, do people realize that there's these barriers for Latinas, that there have been obviously opportunity barriers because there's no reason we should be so far behind. Yes, we face a number of issues, sometimes beyond ethnicity and gender, but also immigration status sometimes. And there are multiple barriers, and yet it's not being discussed. We're not being intentional about Latinas. So we've started this initiative through the California Legislative Latino Caucus to really focus on what we're calling the unseen Latina. So, it's spanning everywhere from, we're working on how to Latina hospitality workers get back into their jobs after this pandemic, all the way to how do we see more Latinas in Hollywood. So it really does span the whole spectrum of job opportunities and advancement opportunities, and just basic opportunities for Latinas, because we are at the bottom of every single kind of indicator, if you will. So we're focusing on really showing people that, first of all, and then looking at ways that we can help change that. And we think you have to be very intentional, that you have to specifically look at Latinas, not just women, not just people of color, and say, how do we create opportunity, advancement opportunity?
I personally think that one step forward that I know that you were fighting for was repealing the Prop 209, which was the affirmative actions that actually helped a lot of women get to college. So I know that is also a way that helped a lot of women. And is there any way that we can push forward with that as well to help that? What are your thoughts on that? How can we push back this?
So I was very disappointed that we weren't able to eliminate the ban on affirmative action, especially given this project we're working on, because in order to be intentional about providing opportunities for Latinas and women, both gender and ethnicity can't be used in state policies, state hiring decisions. So it creates a disincentive, if you will, to try to narrowly tailor programs to help change this dynamic. I was a product of affirmative action. I benefited from the fact that when I went off to school, I went to Stanford. There was a set aside of a number of applications that would be looked at separately, because we were the first in our family to go to college, and they wanted to ensure there was that type of diversity at Stanford. I don't think I could have gotten in without getting that second look. And so I think about the generations that have after me who haven't had that opportunity to really get that second look in our UCs and CSUs. So I was really hopeful that we could repeal the ban on affirmative action, but it obviously there was just too much work to be done to still educate people on. And so I think we're just going to have to, for a while, until we can make another run at it, is try to figure out how we can still work and target our approaches towards ensuring that Latinas have better opportunities, but it's just going to take a little bit more creativity.
I do know that you really push and you keep on pushing until it gets accepted. So I really do hope that it does, so that we can create more opportunities for us Latinas. As a Latina, what were some barriers that you encountered through your journey, through your career?
Challenges?
I know.
I mean, I think one of the things that always amazes me is the assumption that I think a lot of people make, that Latinas are uneducated or not smart. I mean, sometimes it's just trolls on Twitter, like, what must your IQ be? And I have to stop myself from saying, hey, I went to these great schools. I graduated from Stanford. I graduated from Georgetown. I have a law degree from UCLA. I passed the bar the first time. You can question a lot about me, but I'm past the point where I'm insecure about my IQ, or if I'm smart enough. But it's just, and you have to fight yourself. You're like, I don't need to justify myself to anybody, but it's that assumption I think that people make. And it comes in different ways too, because people will say, oh, I didn't know you went to such incredible schools. And then you're like, well, there are a lot of really smart people who didn't go to those incredible schools too. So we shouldn't make these kinds of assumptions, but I think that's often an assumption that is made, and then people treat you accordingly, right? The seriousness with which people treat you is different. So I think that that's part of it. I think that there is a lot of hostility, in particular towards Latinas. There's a lot of stereotypes that exist in people's minds. And so, if I tend to be very outspoken, and I think that along with being a Latina really creates certain beliefs in people's minds about, how loud we are, how inappropriate, or there's just weird, I think, stereotypes, and it's fighting it. Sometimes people are very honest with what they think of us, and then sometimes it's hidden and it's clear in the way they interact with us.
So having gone through all of that, what advice would you give to someone who is seeing a lot of pushback due to the stereotypes? There's sometimes a lot of people that say, oh, you don't belong here. You should just be in the workforce. What advice can you give someone that is getting all that pushback?
Well, that's tough. I still to this day suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes, right? Like, despite everything I've done and where I am, I'll walk into a room and start to doubt myself. Do I belong here? Am I on par? Which is ridiculous. And I can rationally, have that conversation in my head, but it's something that has been ingrained in us for so long that we don't belong. We don't belong at the table. We don't belong in the boardroom. We don't belong in politics, and some of that comes from internally within our own culture and expectations and families sometimes. And a lot of that comes from just views about Latinas in general. But I think it's really important for us to find ways to have more of us visible, right? When people see, part of the whole initiative on Unseen Latinas is because people don't interact with us, right? They often see Latinas as the nanny for their child, the person who cleans their house, the person who cleans up after them, in public spaces, whether it's a hotel or a janitor. So so they don't think of it as my colleague, my, you know, in higher up positions. And that's one of the reasons so important for us to ensure that there are more Latinas in positions of power, that there are more Latinas as lawyers and as teachers and as doctors and as judges, you know, and that Latinas are seen as normalizing those spaces. And while we do it, holding on to being Latinas. And that's part of the, like, asking about the, you know, where did these cultural norms come from, because they don't seem to fit me. So I think it's important that we have more of us and that we're very true to who we are. It's okay to be who we are. We don't have to fully assimilate to be, you know, what is expected of white men in order to be successful in professional life. And I think that's one of my goals is really to help pull more Latinas into these various fields so that people will start to see us differently as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There needs to be more of us, and I'm glad that I have you to look up to and just say, you know what, we do belong, and we just keep on pushing. Another question that I wanted to bring up was that I do know that there is a lot of scrutiny that goes on. During your career, did you face a lot of scrutiny?
Scrutiny. Yeah, I mean, I of course, and I think also it's not just scrutiny. I think there is an expectation. You know, if people don't like, for example, the policies that I write, the laws that I pass, I believe strongly in them. I've thought through them. There's a reason I carry the type of legislation I do. It's usually pertaining to women and low wage workers. This is what I do, right? I represent a community. And I think when people disagree, for some reason, they like to make it very personal, right? You can disagree with a bill, but you know, they like to augment it by disagreeing with you as a person. And I think some of that is because I'm unapologetic, and I know why I ran for office. I didn't run for office in order to just maintain the status quo. I didn't run for office to be a backbencher. You know, I ran for office, and to be honest, I'm away from my kids. I'm away from my husband. I'm up in Sacramento more than I'd like to be. If I'm going to do that, if I'm going to make those sacrifices, it's going to be for a greater good. And that greater good is my community that for so often didn't have unapologetic representation in the halls of the legislature, right? I'm not going to say, I'm sorry that this affects you a little bit negatively, because it's affected our community negatively for a long time. Like we have been asked to set aside, to wait our turn, to work harder, to do better with less for too long. And so I'm not going to be unapologetic when it comes to representing a community that is largely Latino, but is also a number of you know, immigrants and refugees from all kinds of countries, and you know, African American and Filipino. I mean, we have a broad diversity, with one thing in common: it's a working class district that, you know, for too long has been expected to work hard and struggle. And I think if you work hard, we should work on making sure that you're well compensated. So, you know, under scrutiny because I refuse to apologize for who I am and what I represent.
Thank you. Talking about the community, I know right now there's an issue of low vaccination rates, especially right now in Chula Vista.
Mhm.
What can we do about that? I know that a lot of times these people aren't able to get an appointment, and it's just becoming something that it is affecting that community.
It is. And, you know, I will give credit to the county, and they saw that this was going to be a problem. So a number of our super stations and community vaccination points are in our communities, in our hardest hit communities. They were very intentional about that. Nonetheless, the reality is to make an appointment is difficult online. It's difficult. I've made it now for three of my three living parents. So my stepfather, my stepmother, and my father. And, you know, if I didn't do that for them, I'm not sure that they would have figured it out on their own. Right. And so we have to, we've been opening up our office to anyone that calls, helping them get a vaccination appointment. We've pressured, and the county has responded by allowing people to call 211 to set up an appointment as well. And we're just going to have to continue to be diligent. I try to tell people, like, look, what, you know, and I ask everybody, what have you done? Who have you helped get an appointment? Because that's what we need to do. We really do need to help all of us, our elders, and especially the most vulnerable folks, get in, because it's not going to get much easier. And more vaccines are coming. That'll help, actually, because that'll open up more spots. And I think that that's really important. But we got to get through the people who want to be vaccinated, and then we've got to start working on the people who are a little afraid of it. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's important we do it as quickly as possible for our communities that have been hardest hit by COVID and continue to be.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I help my mom as well be able to book hers because you know, the website is hard to manage, but I think if we all help each other, we can get through it. Having that said, I do know that you're also working on helping the hospitality workers that lost their jobs. I actually have some family members that got laid off, and so and they worked in hotels. Can you tell me more about what you're doing for them?
Well, we have a bill that we were a joint author on last year, and we're the lead author this year, to ensure, as hotels open up, or hospitality services in general, large venues, airports, convention centers, as they open back up post pandemic, that they continue, or that they go back to the workers they laid off, in a seniority manner, so that they can be rehired in that order. What's happened, unfortunately, is so many of our workers who have been there the longest, you know, they've served the longest, and so they had the highest pay rate when they were let go. These venues are just saying, no, I'll hire somebody new, even cheaper. And that's, you know, disproportionately affecting Latinas, actually older Latinas, Latinas over 45, who have been working sometimes decades in these hotels, cleaning, picking up after people, you know, serving people, and then are being skipped over to get their job back. So we want to make it, you know, in large venues, a condition for them to have to go through the seniority process and recalling workers. That is a bill currently hopefully working its way through the process, AB 1074, but we're also pressing, because that would take till next year. And we know some of these venues will start to open up this summer. And so we're hopeful that we can get some language into the budget process. If we get it in the budget process, it becomes immediately effective. So that would be closer to, you know, June, July. And we are really pushing to try to see if we can get some language on rehire and recall rights for hospitality workers.
Thank you. Lorena, I actually have a question that I've been itching to ask, but what made you get into this career? Was there an event that made you say, you know what, this is not fair and I'm going to stand up for my people?
Well, it's funny because there were so many, like I entered public service. Well, even when I was young, I wanted to help my community, right? I went off to college, but I didn't really know what it meant. I had all these great degrees, but I had no connections. I didn't really understand how it all worked. I didn't have anyone to look up to in that sense, right? Or any contacts. But I knew I wanted to help people. And then in law school, graduate school, they passed Prop 187, which was, of course, the Pete Wilson initiative to really go after undocumented individuals and their children, basically. And so I was so angry at the way our community is treated, seen every day. You know, my father came here as a farm worker. My mom was a nurse, and everybody I knew, parents served other people, right? And often the people making these decisions and say, we don't belong here. And it was just, I wanted to do more, both for the community when it came to immigration issues and the way we're viewed, and when it came to workplace issues. So I always kind of had that in my mind. I went and worked for the lieutenant governor out of law school. He was the first Latino elected statewide in California, Cruz Bustamante. And literally, I applied for a fellowship in his office. I was an attorney, and it's for like just straight out of undergrad, but I didn't know how else I could go work for him. So I started this fellowship, and I'm making some horrible $18,000 or something, like not enough to pay my student loans, and but I didn't know how else to get in. He hired me out of the program, thank God, and I made a little bit more money. But then I came back and I worked for organized labor, and I loved what I did. I mean, there is nothing to me better than working with workers to empower themselves, right? It's not just helping workers, it's giving workers the tools and helping them have a voice on the job and help themselves and go on strike and demand things. And I think there's something so powerful there. But when I was at the Labor Council and heading, and that's the overall, all the unions in San Diego, one of the things that would most frustrate me is our members would always come out to walk for elected officials, for people running for office, right? We'd bring in the candidate running for office. They'd say how they stood with us, they stood with working families, they stood with unions, that they were going to fight for a higher minimum wage or for healthcare. And then they get into office and these votes would come along. And sometimes people would say, well, you don't understand how hard it is. They're competing interests. And all I could think is, yeah, there was a janitor who worked till 2 a.m, went home, fed her kids, and came up to walk precincts for you. But she doesn't understand how hard it is to make a tough decision like voting for her to get a raise, like give me a break. And so I said, I want an elected official who wakes up every single day and thinks, how can I make California better for workers? That's all I want. And I said, well, I would do that. And so that's why I ran for office. I just, I said, well, if this is what I expect out of an elected official, I'm going to serve as an example of what I expect. And every day I do that. Every day I'm thinking of ways we can help working Californians and especially the working class.
Thank you for sharing that. I actually the whole reason I'm here too is because my grandfather was with Cesar Chavez, also working in the farm. So if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here. And my mom raised me as a single mother, and as a Latina, I also going through school and education, I also find myself that I have this education, but yet I don't know the network. It's very hard to actually find my way. So thank you for sharing that. It's kind of nice to know that I'm not the only one that is facing that, and seeing you being able to be where you're at is actually very nice and inspiring for me to actually want to make things better in California, because I see a lot of people in my community that their voices are not being heard. A lot of injustices have happened. A lot of my friends who are Latinas are stuck, and I want to be able to help them be unstuck. So thank you for taking that step forward too.
Help them be unstuck. And remember this too. If there's one thing I could tell you and anyone else your age, and don't hesitate to reach out. Sometimes I feel like in a lot of ways I didn't know anyone like what I wanted to do. There was no Latina to look up to. But if there was, I don't know if I would have reached out, because I thought they'd be busy or they wouldn't want to help. But I give my email out a lot, because I love when especially young Latinas reach out and want advice. And it's a lot, but I try to sit down and give what I can and to help when I can. When young Latinas run for office, for city council or school board, anywhere in the state, if they have good values, if they're, care about the things I care about, I try to find ways to raise them a little money, because I know, like, endorse them and help how I can, because I know it's so hard. It's like, we don't have, first of all, people don't, again, expect us to run for office. They don't expect us to be in those positions. And then we don't have the network. It's not like people will say, oh, you're going to run for office, you need to call 25 friends to give you $100. When I ran for office, I didn't know 25 people who had $100. Come on. It's like, or that I'd feel comfortable saying, I know you have to pay the rent, but do you have $100? But the kind of the expectations that are put out there, you're like, hold up. So I was like, you know what I can't do? I can find 100 people to give me $25. And so sometimes it's just thinking outside the box, but it's helpful if we can help each other. And so I always try to say, like, any way I can help, but all of us should feel comfortable with reaching out. And maybe what's the worst that's going to happen? Somebody's not going to respond, maybe they're too busy, maybe they're not interested, but you'll find somebody who is willing. And I'm always here if there's a way I can be helpful.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Gonzalez. I know you're busy and our time is up, but thank you so much for taking your time out of your schedule to be able to talk on this podcast, so that we can be able to hopefully get Latinas like myself unstuck.
I doubt you're stuck, but this is a good start. It was great to come on, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Take care.
Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
If you ever feel stuck or feel like you can't move forward, know that you're not alone, and that many of today's successful women have gone through the exact same feeling. No matter how hard it seems, keep pushing. Do not let yourself get discouraged. Keep looking for opportunities out there. Always remember, sí se puede. Yes, we can. Thanks again for tuning in. We're happy to have you as a listener. Please tune in for more episodes like this. Until then, hasta luego. Hearing Her Voice is brought to you by the Women's March San Diego at UCSD. The podcast is written and produced by Scarlett, Lopez, and Jinho Jung. Thank you, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, for taking your time to chat with us today. Our design director is Melisa Wang. Our creative director is Zuri Inzunza. And our technical director is Katherine, Cordova. If you know someone whom we should contact or want to be in our podcast, please email us at wmsducsandiego@gmail.com. To learn more about Women's March San Diego at UCSD, please visit our website on Linktree. Subscribe to Hear Her Voice on Anchor app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you.